City Matters.
Welcome to HMTV, folks. My name is Alan Mindel, and I'm the host of Influential Origins. And today we have our second interview with a fantastic guest, our congressman here on Long Island, Congressman Tom Suozzi. Tom, it's great to continue our conversation now. Thank you so much for being with us.
Alan, thanks so much for having me on.
So, Tom, we were talking in the break about a book that you read in high school. Can you tell me a little bit about it?
The book was Man's Search for Meaning. It was, you mentioned in our previous show that I went to Chaminade All Boys Catholic High School.
Yep.
Man's Search for Meaning was by Viktor Frankl, and he was a Holocaust survivor. And it's probably one of the biggest books that had most influence on me in my life in how could a person face these awful circumstances and still move forward. And the meaning that he tried to convey in the book is that no matter what you face in life, because there's always going to be ups and there's always going to be downs, this is the ultimate down, is you choose how you're going to conduct yourself. You choose how you're going to respond to your circumstances. And that just had a big impact on me. And we talked before about my family. My grandfather used to give speeches at family weddings, and he'd give advice to the new couple, and he'd say, "Que cosa matrimonio?" He'd say, "What is this thing, marriage?" He'd say, "Marriage is like a long journey with a lot of ups and a lot of downs." He said, "But that's okay, because in life, non ci sono rose senza spine." You can't have a rose without the thorns. You can't have the good things in life without the suffering as well. And that's a big thing for my kids and I and my wife and our family, or my extended family, is that there's always going to be highlights and lowlights in life. Your challenge is, how do you keep on going forward despite those things? Because they're both roses and thorns. They're both part of your life no matter what. And you choose, Viktor Frankl, how you're going to respond to the circumstances you face.
I think we always try to find a little bit of an equilibrium. And for survivors, and as a child of two survivors, all the suffering and horror that they suffered is what drove them so hard to provide and make the world a better place. It's that horror that they lived through that is the driving force for them to try to do good in the world and make the world a better place.
That's a challenge for all of us.
Yeah. And you tried to make the world a better place as a mayor. And I remember you as a mayor because you were a very, very energetic mayor. And you were convinced that any investment in the world would be the best investment as long as you made it in
Glen Cove.
That was the only key. You just had to make that investment in Glen Cove. And that drive at the time, it definitely spurred this area in a way that it hadn't done in several years before then. That was a very, I think, formative period for you politically.
Oh, I learned so much, and I did so much. I got so much done. One of the things I say to other people is that when you're young, you don't know what you can't do.
Right.
You haven't had all these defeats along the way.
Right.
And so you just go. I just would go for it. Go, I'm gonna do it. And we got so much done. I talked in the previous show about all the different things we got accomplished. And I had tremendous success as mayor. I mean, I really did so many things, helped so many people, got so many things accomplished. But it was all about being young and just, go for it.
And you didn't have a lot of fear. And that kind of position or attitude to the world was the same thing when you were county executive, I recall.
Well, running for county executive, you have to remember.
Right.
I ran for county executive. I was not the party candidate, so to speak.
No.
My opponent, wonderful guy, still a good friend, much more of a good friend now than back then, Tom DiNapoli.
Well, well, too.
He was endorsed by everybody. He was endorsed by Schumer and by Spitzer and by McCall and by, Hillary Clinton ended up doing a press conference with him. That's another long story. And he was the favorite. Everybody was with. I had my mother, I had my wife,
Right.
And so, but I ended up winning that race. So, here I was a young mayor, 31. I was the youngest county executive in the history of Nassau County at 39. And I was just on fire. And then I got in a big fight with Shelley Silver and Joe Bruno up in Albany, and I did Fix Albany, and I won that fight. I won the Democratic primary for Chuck Levine to beat David Siddickman that nobody expected to happen, and I helped to flip a Republican Senate seat upstate New York, and I ended up getting what's called a Medicaid cap. Long story, but that was a big victory. And I was like, you know what? If I just go as hard as I can and just, what I think is the right thing and I'll take on everybody and we're going to get it done. And here we go and blah, blah, blah. And then I ran for governor.
But even as county executive, I remember you had a golf outing and I had called someone and said, how do you get to the golf outing? And you say, where the police protest from the PBA is on the corner. That's where you make the turn. That's how you'll know where to find me.
Well, I was, I just got endorsed by the police in my congressional race, which is unusual for them to endorse a Democrat. But in those days, the cops in Long Island are paid a lot of money, very difficult jobs, very dangerous jobs. But they were running commercials against me.
Right.
And you talked about my kids in the first episode. They had a commercial where they had a guy break through the window. And there's a little lady shaking in her bed, and it says, Tom Suozzi doesn't care about your safety. Tom Suozzi, good for the bad guys, bad for the good guys. And I come home, my daughter's little girl, and she said, Daddy, why are you bad for the good guys? I said, you know how like Spider-Man is trying to do the thing, he's fighting for everybody, but some people think he's the bad guy, but he's really a good guy? He said, Daddy, he's just like Spider-Man. So they flew a plane over Jones Beach with a big banner behind it. And Tom Suozzi, good for the bad guys, bad for the good guys. But I won that race. And I get along with the cops great.
And then there were, we have in Long Island, we have water districts everywhere, sewer districts everywhere. Still have them everywhere.
New York City is one government. 8 million people, one government.
Yeah.
They run everything. The police, the fire, the schools, the sewers, the water, one government. Nassau County, 1.5 million people, 1.4 million people, really. We have 435 governments.
435.
So it's the 3 towns and the 2 cities, and then 60 some odd villages and 50 some odd school districts, and 70 fire districts and water districts. So I was talking about how can we either consolidate or can we at least share services amongst. I got killed for that politically. That's one of the things that took me down.
To try, but the goal was to make it more affordable to live on Long Island.
That's the big problem with here is it's just very expensive. The taxes are too high.
25 years later, it's still...
Well, we got the property tax cap.
Story.
When I ran for governor against Spitzer, my main issue was the property tax cap. I was for it. He was against it. A year later, he asked me to be the chair of the New York State Commission on Property Tax Relief. And I traveled the state selling the idea of we have to cap the property taxes. You can't raise them above 2% of the rate of inflation. And Andrew Cuomo ended up, and I strike that. Spitzer, then Patterson reappointed me to that commission. And then when Cuomo came into office, he actually put the property tax cap in place. And the taxes are still high here, but instead of going up 6% a year, which is what they were before that, they went up on average 2% a year.
Right, which has attempted to help.
It's
Even though we still have 400 plus.
It's still the tax. Well, there's many reasons why our taxes are so high, but if you want me to, we're not growing. We're suburban sprawled.
Yep.
So unless we grow in our downtowns, we're not going to expand our tax base.
And nobody wants to grow in their downtowns to make computers and approve housing.
So then we don't get our fair share from the state or from the federal government.
Right.
Then we have all these governments.
Right.
I can't remember all the reasons now. I haven't given that speech in a long time.
But when you ran for governor on a statewide basis, that was the principal issue of it. On the national front, we can attack issues that affect all Americans nationally. But on the local front, we're competing where to live with every other city and state across the union.
New York State's in a lot of trouble. It's just too expensive to live here, and the taxes are too high. And during the Bloomberg years, his philosophy was it's more expensive to live here, but you're going to get a better product, better quality of life. Now we got the high cost, and we don't have the high product. So when we lost the state and local tax deduction under the first Trump administration in 2017, when they capped the deduction at $10,000, that made it even more difficult for people to afford to live here. And a lot of people left here to escape the high tax burden. Even though they love living here, they'll get the residency in a no income tax or a low property tax state, and then come back here to visit or come back here just part-time.
Right. And there's a lot of people, at least that I know.
We have to lower property taxes here in Long Island and here in New York State, and we need to lower state income taxes as well. But then I ran against Spitzer, then I ran against Hochul. Both times I got killed. So I've learned my lesson. I'm not.
You're not running, but the issues didn't go anywhere.
The issues didn't. Well, that's I can't win a Democratic primary. I'm not progressive enough to win a primary. I'm good for the general election because I think what I'm saying is what the people want.
Right.
My last campaign for governor was about high taxes, public safety, which was a major issue and still is in New York State, and corruption, big problem in New York State.
Over this period of time, when you started in the late 90s, early 2000s, the Clinton years and things like that, you fit a certain type of Democrat that was prevalent throughout the party. But like you said, today to win that primary would be very difficult. And I find that to be an incredibly interesting thing because, I'm a Democrat, or have been a Democrat the way you were a Democrat for many years. But today that world is a little bit of a different world.
Well, the Democrats have got to wake up. The brand is a mess.
Right.
And what's happened is two different things. One is the far left of the Democratic Party has gotten a lot of attention.
Yep.
And the more moderate Democrats, of which are many of them, most of them, the far left is like, less than 10%. All the rest of us have been afraid to stand up to the far left.
Which is the key to the whole thing.
And if you don't stand up to the far left, then it's easy to get branded that way. Also importantly, is that President Trump and the Republicans generally, but President Trump certainly, figured out how the media is so fractured. It's not like it was in the old days where, it's the news stations and the local paper. It's much more fractured among social media, among podcasts and long form interviews like this. It's ethnic media, it's traditional media as well, national media. So it's much more fractured. Trump figured that out. That's why he didn't have as much money as Kamala Harris did, but he won using the media effectively. But the most important thing is that whenever somebody on the left would say something crazy, now it could be a city council person from Oshkosh, right, or it could be a member of Congress, or it could be a governor, or it could be a mayor, or it could be a whatever. Mm-hmm. As long as one person said it, he effectively, along with the Republican operation, said the Democrats. So I'm not like that. I'm not defund the police. I'm not, these crazy rallies.
You've never been.
Never. So, but they would define the Democrats better than the Democrats defined themselves because they weren't standing up to the far left enough. I did, but others didn't.
Oh no, you did.
And I paid the price for it.
Well, sometimes, but not always.
Right. So the Republicans have crazy people on their side. Right. They got Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert and Matt Gaetz. But the President Trump, became the spokesperson, so you couldn't define them the same way because they had a bigger voice of the president. Our President Biden, wonderful man, I support him, wonderful, but not a great communicator. So the Democratic Party was defined by the Republicans, and the Democrats failed to stand up to the far left and got defined. That transgender commercial was devastating to Democrats, where Kamala Harris was saying something about providing transgender operation for people in jail that were undocumented, paid for with taxpayer dollars. It was like, what?
Right.
And nobody stood up to it. So,
but your brand, I mean, you talked about being in a caucus, which I'd love for you to talk about, that is trying to solve the problems pragmatically, not with any of that. When you ran, and you had at one point in your first congressional run an incredibly progressive person that was attacking you left, right, and center, and your family and your kids and your in-laws in a way that was as distasteful as can possibly done. And I'm giving the PG version of it now. And
so I'm now the chairperson of the Problem Solvers Caucus. 50 Democrats and Republicans evenly divided, who meet every week to try and find common ground to find out how can we actually solve the problems we face. So like immigration for me is the big one that we need to focus on.
Right.
And we need to secure the border. We need to fix the broken asylum system. Asylum used to be, everybody loved asylum. In the 1980s, when I was when someone defected from Russia, we were from the Soviet Union, we were like, yes, asylum, great, we love, come, please. But now it's being misused for economic reasons. And our common enemy, Democrats and Republicans should have a common enemy, which are the cartels and the organized criminals and the coyotes that are getting paid $10,000 a person, billions of dollars every quarter to bring people to our southern border, to make this awful track across Mexico, southern border, and figure out how to game our system and weaken our country. So we have to secure the border, fix the broken asylum system, and let's finally resolve the issue of the dreamers and the TPS recipients, the people, temporary protective status, the people we invited to America after they had an earthquake or a flood or a civil war or something like that. We invited them here 10, 20 years, 30 years ago. They still don't have any status. Farm workers. Half the farm workers in America are undocumented. Half of them, at least. Someone told me 85% the other day. I got to find out the real answer. But it's at least half. The people who helped us in Afghanistan, we should be helping them come over here. Sure. The healthcare workers. I mean, so let's make a deal. I'm trying to convince my Democratic colleagues. I'm trying to convince the Republicans. Instead of the fight over the budget being the normal fight where they're going to need Democratic votes, Republicans have a narrow majority. Right. Instead of being a fight over like this program or that program, see, we'll help you get your votes to get a budget done. If
you've done that, it's not theoretical for you.
Yeah, but this is the big one. If I get this done, it's the biggest thing I ever did.
But before the presidential election, there was a problem passing a budget.
Yeah, what happened was, but not just the budget, there was a great bill to fund Ukraine, fund Israel, and fund Taiwan. And one of my first things when I came back to Congress to take Santos's seat was I went to Ukraine and I came back to the States. I wrote an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal and I said, Speaker Johnson, who's afraid to put this bill on the floor to fund Israel and Ukraine and Taiwan, because Marjorie Taylor Greene says, you put that bill on the floor, we'll kick you out the way we kicked Kevin McCarthy out.
Right.
I said, Mr. Speaker, you put that bill on the floor, it will pass overwhelmingly bipartisan, number one. And number two, even though I'm a Democrat, if they try to kick you out, if Marjorie Taylor Greene tries to kick you out, I will vote to keep you as Speaker, and I will encourage other Democrats to do the same thing.
And that stabilized Congress.
And that's what happened. Yeah. Yep. That was a big deal.
It was a real big deal. It was different.
I'm not going to vote for him now.
Well, listen, but that opportunity may come.
Oh, no, if it's something...
You did what was in the interests of America and the world.
Yeah.
More than what was in the interest of...
The party.
The party.
Well, that's what everything should be.
That's what everything should always be. Let's talk about some of those places you just named. And, coming from a Holocaust center and, having parents that, like many of the people that seek asylum here, and I would say that my parents were refugees after the Holocaust, they found their asylum in America and created this wonderful American dream without which I would never be here, But a lot of people like them, because no place would take Jews, they ended up in Israel. And at the time, the UN had a resolution, a two-state solution, and that vision, which on the one hand, Israel's the only democracy functioning in the entire Middle East, the only place where women have rights, where people of different sexual orientations have rights, where people of all religions have religious freedom. Yet, there is a side of the party, and it's definitely not your side because you're as good of a friend as Israel can ever have, that doesn't see it that way. And why do you think that is? And what do you think is the way out of that for the party and to help the conversation become more mature?
I think that there's been a very effective disinformation campaign over a period of 30 years at least.
Yeah.
Which is part anti-Semitism, part manipulation, which has been that, especially trying to go after African-American and Latino and other minorities in the United States of America and say, the Palestinians are oppressed the way you're oppressed, and that's why you should be on their team. And so educating African-American and Latino and other members of Congress about the real truth of what's going on in Israel is essential, and how important a friend they are to the United States of America and how important they are to our region. I'm unequivocally pro-Israel, will always be pro-Israel. We talked about my dad in the previous show. I don't know if I ever told you. When my dad passed away, I found an Israel war bond from 1973, I think it was. Is that when the war was? 73?
That's when the Yom Kippur War was.
Yom Kippur was. So 1973, signed by Golda Meir.
Yeah, she needed it then.
Well, he never cashed it in. It's probably worth a lot of money now.
You should try.
So, and I've told you the story before about when I went to Israel the first time, and I went to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Did I ever tell you that story?
Nope.
All right, so we go to Israel, and it was a last minute thing when I was first county executive. It was 2002, October of 2002, right after the massacre in Hebron during the Second Intifada, and it's a very political trip.
Right.
And went to, Yad Vashem, of course, and went to the Knesset, and went to, met with Shimon Peres, who explained the two-state solution to me at the time.
Right.
Which really educated me a lot. And met with the U.S. ambassador to Israel, and I met with Ragnar Gisan, who was Ariel Sharon's spokesperson, and went to the hospital, the Hadassah Hospital, saw the skin banks. That was like floored me, because there were a lot of bombings at the time.
Yep.
Went to Gush Etzion, one of the first settlements. Went to, just a very political trip.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, we go, and I wasn't planning for this trip. It was a last-minute thing. I was invited at the last minute. And we go to the Western Wall, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is where Jesus walked.
Right.
I mean, this is where the temple was. And I was like,
that's how you have a Samaritan.
I was like, I can't believe that I'm here. This, and I started thinking about my life and the meaning of my life and what am I doing in public service. And then I go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm in Jerusalem at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre where Jesus died and was buried and rose again. I said, I have to go to Mass here. If I tell my mother that I went to Israel, to Jerusalem, and I didn't go to Mass, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. So we go back to the King David Hotel. There's nobody there except for us, because no tourism at all because of all the bombings that were going on. And I say to the people, I say, I got to go to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre for Mass tomorrow morning. He said, no, you can't. We don't have, everywhere we went, we had armed guards, with big machine guns and barbed wire on the buses we were taking. And so we can't afford the security guards to take you, and it's not on our itinerary. We don't have time. You can't go to church. So that next morning, I get up by myself. I sneak out of the hotel. I go down the big hill and into the city, and I go to the Mass at the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And I finished Mass, and I'm thinking to myself, oh, I'm so proud of myself. My mother's going to be so proud of me that I went to Mass at the church. And look at me, I didn't have any armed guards. Right. I didn't have anybody protecting me. I'm so courageous. Look at me, I'm so proud of myself. I had so courageous that I went by myself without my armed guards to go to church. And then I walk outside, and I see all these little girls getting on the bus to go to school. And I'm like, oh my gosh. This is what people are living with every day.
Every day.
And they're still living their lives where they've kept democracy. Yep. They've kept the rule of law. Yep. They've made the desert bloom at the time. They were just talking about software in those days. They've fostered this amazing economic renaissance, and while everybody's trying to kill them in the neighborhood. So these are the people. I'm not courageous. These people are courageous that have lived this life at the time 60 years, and from that day it was like a lightning bolt went off my head. I was always going to be supportive of Israel going forward from that moment. And so I have been. And we have to educate people about what's really going on. This is the fight that Israel is fighting. They're fighting on our behalf against the terrorists and against the people that would want to destroy our way of life. The same people that say death to Israel want to say death to America.
They do say death to America and so, every day.
Now, my hope, my belief, I don't know how much time we have left, but my hope is that we can get the Saudis and we can get UAE and we can get at the other Sunni Arab states to team up together with Israel and the United States and our pro-Israel friends in the Western world to work together to now govern the Gaza Strip. Despite a lot of people don't want to do this. Of course, Hamas doesn't want that, and PLO doesn't want that, and the Saudis and UAE are hesitant to do it, and there are other people that don't want it. But we have to overcome that and figure out how we can set up this government to demilitarize the area, to de-radicalize the area, to actually pick up the garbage and have the schools and make sure the water's clean, and to run a real place where people can live a decent and rebuild the place. And so that's the only way we could ever have a hope of a two-state solution, because it can't happen any other way.
Well, you can't have two states where one of the two parties says, we agree that you should have your own state too, and the other one says, we believe you should be wiped off the face of the earth.
Absolutely right.
along with the rest of Western civilization.
Absolutely right.
What would you say to people that suffer the trauma that have seen hostages or people who have gone to school here in America?
Not just go to school. Omer Nutra from my desk. I have a picture of me with Omer Nutra when he's at this Solomon Schechter School.
Yeah.
When I was like the county executive and he was a senior, because I helped the Solomon Schechter School a lot. And I didn't even know that Omer Nutra was Omer Nutra until his parents showed me the picture of me with him as a young boy. And people have suffered so much. And I've seen the films and I've got the briefings, and it's a crime. It's an awful, terrible human crime. Tom Lantos is a Holocaust survivor, used to be a congressman, used to say, the veneer of civilization is paper thin.
Paper thin.
We are its guardians and we cannot rest.
Yeah.
So we must destroy Hamas. They are not some loose band of desert soldiers. They are a sophisticated, militant killing machine that wants to destroy Israel, kill Jews, and even destroy America. So we got to beat them and wipe them out.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for being with us today. We really do appreciate it. And we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, buddy.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Be good.
Thanks. Okay.